The stars stretched like a vast, indifferent canvas beyond the viewport of the UNS Endurance, their cold light filtering through the reinforced glass. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, her knuckles whitening against the worn leather. At 42, she was a veteran of too many border skirmishes and supply runs, her face etched with lines that spoke of hard decisions rather than age. The ship hummed around her, a symphony of recycled air and distant engine throbs, carrying the last contingent of human diplomats from the Galactic Concorde's core worlds. Beside her, Lieutenant Kai Ren adjusted the holographic display flickering between them. Kai was the cautious one, always double-checking manifests and running simulations twice over. His dark eyes scanned the readouts, fingers dancing across the interface with the precision of someone who'd grown up tinkering with salvage tech on a colony fringe. Fuel reserves at 87%, Captain. The jump to Sol should be clean, but these old ion drives, they're finicky after the embargo. Ilara nodded, her voice steady as she replied, finicky or not, we're not turning back. The Concords made their choice, humanity's out. No more begging for scraps at their table. She glanced at the empty seats where the full diplomatic team had once sat. Now it was just the two of them and a skeleton crew of engineers below decks, the weight of departure pressing like an unspoken goodbye. In the comms alcove, Dr. Mira Solis monitored the final transmissions. Mira was the witty outlier, her sharp tongue a shield against the galaxy's endless bureaucracy. Born on Earth but raised in the outer stations, she could quote Concord law in 5 languages and dismantle an argument with a single quip. Her fingers hovered over the console, patching through the last encrypted message to the waiting flotilla. Last hail from the Vexery envoy, she called out, her tone laced with dry amusement. They wish us fair winds in the void. As if we're sailing clipper ships instead of fleeing their precious alliance. Ilara allowed a small smile. Poetic. Log it and cut the line. We're done with their myths and mandates. The Endurance had been humanity's foothold in the Concorde for decades, a gleaming symbol of ingenuity amid the sprawling alien megastructures of Epsilon Eridani. But the latest crisis, a cascade of resource disputes and fabricated scandals, had forced the withdrawal. No grand betrayal, just the slow erosion of trust until humanity stood alone again. As the ship aligned for the jump, a subtle tremor ran through the hull. Kai's brow furrowed. That's not the engines. Sensors picking up interference, something's dragging on our trajectory. He leaned closer to the display, the holographic grid pulsing with anomalous readings. A shadow loomed in the scans, not a ship, but a relic, an ancient derelict half buried in the system's debris field, its mass unexpectedly pulling at their path. Mira spun in her chair, her wit sharpening to concern. A ghost wreck? In Concorde space? They cleared this sector years ago. The tremor intensified, panels rattling as the Endurance veered slightly off course. Alarms began to chirp softly, a warning that their departure wasn't as clean as planned. Ilara unstrapped, rising with the deliberate calm that had kept her crew alive through worse. Helm, evasive burn. Kai, give me a full scan. Mira, hail any nearby Concorde patrols, we might need a tow after all. But even as she spoke, doubt flickered in her chest. This wasn't just bad luck. The galaxy had a way of clinging to those who tried to leave. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the shuttle's engines vibrating through her bones like a distant storm. The view screen flickered with the asteroid field's debris, chunks of rock tumbling lazily in the void, but her focus was on the sensor readouts blinking urgently. Status on the comms array? She asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Lieutenant Kai Ren, her wiry engineer with a perpetual smudge of grease on his cheek, hunched over the console. It's holding, Captain, but barely. That solar flare we hit earlier fried half the relays. We're blind to the fleet's position without a fix. He wiped his brow, fingers dancing across the holographic interface, coaxing sparks of light from the damaged circuits. From the co-pilot's seat, Dr. Mira Solis leaned forward, her sharp eyes scanning the star charts. The xenobiologist's calm demeanor hid a mind that raced like a pulsar, always 3 steps ahead. If we don't link up soon, we'll miss the departure window. The Alliance delegation is expecting our data on the artifact. Without it, negotiations could collapse. She glanced at Ilara, a flicker of worry breaking her composure. and we're running low on oxygen scrubbers. 2 days max. Elara nodded, her jaw set. The artifact, a crystalline relic unearthed from the asteroid's core, pulsed faintly in the cargo hold behind them. It was supposed to be humanity's olive branch to the fractious alien coalitions, a proof of shared cosmic heritage. But now, with the fleet pulling out amid rising tensions, it felt like clutching a grenade. Kai, reroute power from non-essentials. Get us a burst signal. Mira, plot a course through the field's edge, avoid the dense clusters. Kai grunted, his hands blurring as he initiated the transfer. Alarms blared softly as lights dimmed in the cabin, the air recyclers whining in protest. Power diverted. Sending ping now. The shuttle shuddered, a low groan echoing through the hull as the comms array strained to life. Myra's fingers flew over her panel, tracing a winding path amid the floating boulders. Course laid in. It'll be tight, grazing some magnetic anomalies. Might scramble our shields. Better than drifting, Elara replied, thrusting the controls forward. The shuttle lurched, engines flaring blue against the black. Rocks loomed larger on the view screen, shadows playing across their pitted surfaces like ancient carvings. One massive fragment spun into view, its surface glinting with metallic veins. Perhaps remnants of some long-lost mining op. Kai's console beeped triumphantly. Signal set. Fleets responding, their 12 light minutes out, adjusting vector to rendezvous. Relief washed over Elara, but it was short-lived. A proximity alert screamed, red lights bathing the cabin. Myra's voice cut sharp, incoming debris field, collision course. Elara yanked the yoke, the shuttle banking hard. The world tilted, G-forces pinning them to their seats as a boulder the size of a shuttle whipped past, close enough to rattle the hull. Sparks flew from Kai's panel, and he cursed under his breath, slamming a fist to stabilize it. Shields at 60%. That was too close. As the immediate danger passed, Elara exhaled, her grip loosening slightly. The artifact's hum seemed louder now, a subtle vibration syncing with the ship's pulse. Mira turned, her expression thoughtful. The Alliance won't wait forever. If we deliver this, it could rewrite everything, turn rivals into partners. Or get us all vaporized if they think it's a weapon, Kai muttered, nursing his singed console. Elara met their eyes, the weight of command settling heavier. We deliver it. That's the mission. The shuttle steadied, pushing toward the rendezvous point, but the asteroid field's shadows lingered, hinting at unseen threats drifting in the dark. The dim hum of the shuttle's engines vibrated through the deck plating, a steady reminder that they were still alive, still moving. The view screen ahead showed the swirling nebula they'd just skirted, its gases twisting like angry spirits in the void. Beside her, Engineer Kai Ren hunched over a flickering console, his fingers dancing across holographic keys, sweat beading on his forehead despite the recycled air's chill. Status on the core? Elara asked, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. She kept her tone even, but the edge was there, always was after the ambush. Kai didn't look up. Holding at 60%. That ion storm we punched through fried half the stabilizers. One more hit like that and we're venting atmosphere. He paused, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. But the NAV computer's plotting a clear vector to the relay station. ETA 12 hours if we don't push it. 12 hours. Elara's mind raced through the implications. The alien fleet, those sleek, thorned vessels from the Vexery Collective, had chased them for days, their weapons tasting human resolve and finding it bitter. Diplomacy? That word felt like a relic now, a myth spun from the old archives back on the colonies. Humanity's departure from the core worlds had been meant as a grand exodus, a fresh start amid the stars. Instead, it had ignited old grudges, turning envoys into targets. Lieutenant Mira Thorne entered the bridge from the aft hatch, her boots clanging softly. She was the cautious one, always calculating risks before speaking, but today her eyes burned with quiet fire. In her hands she carried a sealed data slate, its surface etched with the faint scars of hasty repairs. "Captain, we've got incoming chatter on the wideband. It's fragmented, but it sounds like a distress beacon. Not Vexery, human signature, maybe from the Pioneer outpost." Elara turned, her braids swinging like a pendulum. The Pioneer. Last they'd heard, it was a frontier station, a hub for traders and scouts pushing the edges of known space. Fu is calling for help. Patch it through. And Mira, get Jax up here. We need eyes on this. Jax Harlan, the team's wiry comms specialist, arrived moments later, his usual witty grin absent. He was brave to a fault, the kind who joked through hull breaches, but the recent losses, their escort frigate shredded in the first skirmish, had carved lines into his young face. He slid into the secondary station, syncing his implants with a soft chime. Got it? Boosting signal. The bridge speakers crackled to life, static weaving through a voice distorted by distance and desperation. This is Pioneer Actual, under siege. Vexery boarding parties, need extraction, coordinates enclosed. Ilara's jaw tightened. A trap? Possibly. The Vexery were cunning, their biotech swarms adapting faster than human code could counter. But ignoring it meant abandoning their own, and that wasn't how humanity survived the long nights. Kai, can we divert without killing the core? He glanced up, eyes narrowing. It's tight. We'd shave our margin to the bone, 4 hours to intercept, then straight shot to the relay. But if we run into trouble... He trailed off, the unspoken risk hanging heavy. Mira stepped forward, her voice steady. We can't leave them, Captain. The Pioneers got families, not just soldiers. If we pull this off, it buys us allies for the long haul. Jax nodded, his fingers already plotting the course. And think of the story. Humans swooping in like ghosts in the machine. Might even make the Vexery think twice next time. Ilara waited, the weight of command pressing down. The nebula's glow cast eerie shadows across the crew's faces, a silent witness to choices that could end them all. Finally, she leaned forward. Do it. Alter course. But arm the turrets and prep the evasion protocols. We're not heroes today, we're survivors with a debt to collect. As the shuttle banked sharply, engines groaning in protest. Rhodist, the stars shifted on the view screen. The distress signal pulsed stronger now, a beacon in the dark. But in the back of Ilara's mind, doubt flickered. What if this detour was the spark that turned their flight into a funeral pyre? The hours blurred into a tense vigil. Kai worked feverishly, rerouting power from non-essentials. Life support dimmed slightly, recyclers humming louder to compensate. Mira coordinated with Jax, cross-referencing the signal against known Vexery tactics. Their boarding pods latch like burrs, she said, pulling up schematics. We hit them with EMP bursts on approach, disrupt the biolinks without full engagement. Jax chuckled dryly, the sound forced. Yeah, because nothing says welcome like frying their nervous systems. Just don't miss. Those thorns pack a neurotoxin punch. Ilara listened, her gaze fixed on the approaching coordinates. The Pioneer station emerged from the sensor fog, a spindly lattice of habitats and docks, now marred by flickering lights and the scars of plasma fire. Vexery ships, 3 of them, coiled around it like serpents, their hulls pulsing with organic veins. They're entrenched, Kai reported, his voice tight. Docking clamps engaged. We go in hot, we draw fire. Ilara stood, smoothing her uniform. Then we go smart. Jax, hail them, demand surrender in Vexery tongue. Make it sound like we've got backup inbound. It was a bluff, their lone shuttle against a swarm, but humanity's edge had always been in the mind, not the dim hum of the auxiliary engines vibrated through the deck plating, a constant reminder that the Endeavor was limping, not soaring. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the edge of the navigation console, her knuckles whitening as she scanned the readouts. The alien delegation's chamber was a makeshift bubble of protocol amid the chaos, translucent walls projecting holographic star maps, the air thick with the scent of recycled oxygen and something sharper like ozone from overtaxed circuits. They're stalling, muttered Jax, her chief engineer, wiping grease from his brow with the back of his hand. He was all wiry energy, the kind that came from too many all-nighters jury-rigging failing systems. That envoy from the Zorith Collective keeps circling back to the same question. Why abandon the core worlds now? As if we owe them our migration routes. Ilara shot him a sidelong glance, her voice low but firm. Because the core worlds are dying, Jax. Asteroid storms, failing shields, it's not abandonment, it's survival. She straightened, facing the holographic envoy across the table. The Zorith representative, a shimmering cascade of bioluminescent tendrils, pulsed with restrained agitation. Its translator chimed softly, approximating speech in human standard. Your species' exodus disrupts established pacts, it said, the words emerging from the device like rippling water. The collective has invested in your outposts. Diplomacy was forged on mutual aid. To depart without consultation turns alliance into echo. Jax snorted, leaning against a bulkhead, his tool belt clinking. Mutual aid? You mean the tech you traded us that barely held against your own border skirmishes? We're not echoing anyone, we're charting our own damn path. Ilara raised a hand, silencing him without a word. Her caution had always been her anchor, the trait that kept the crew from fracturing under pressure. But Jax's grit was what got them this far, patching hull breaches while others panicked. Envoy, the Endeavor carries the last viable colony seed for Epsilon Eridani. The storms have claimed 3 ships already. We can't afford delays. The Envoy's tendrils coiled tighter, casting erratic lights across the chamber. Outside, through the viewport, the void stretched endless, punctuated by the faint glow of debris fields, remnants of the core world's unraveling. A sudden alert blared from the console. Another micrometeor strike, glancing but enough to rattle the frame. Jax was already moving, grabbing a scanner from his belt. That was too close. If they don't clear our vectors soon, we'll be picking shards out of the engines for weeks. Ilara nodded, her mind racing through contingencies. The plan had been simple: negotiate passage through Zorith space, trade colony data for safe transit. But the Envoy's insistence on reparations for disrupted trade lanes had turned it into a standoff. She leaned forward, eyes locking on the hologram. What do you propose then? Name your terms. The tendrils unfurled slightly, a sign of calculation. A shared command interface. Embed collective observers in your navigation core. Ensure the exodus aligns with our stellar cartography. Jax's face darkened. Over my dead circuits. That's not aid, that's a leash. Before Ilara could respond, the chamber's lights flickered. Alarms wailed ship-wide, a power surge from the damaged engines. The hologram wavered, the Envoy's form distorting like smoke in wind. Captain? Jax barked, sprinting to a side panel. He yanked open an access grate, sparks flying as he dove in. Auxiliaries overloading. If we don't vent the plasma buildup, we'll lose the whole drive. Ilara's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady, turning back to the fading envoy. This is what we're facing. Storms, failures, humanity's departure isn't myth, it's necessity. Help us now or watch us burn. The envoy hesitated, tendrils pulsing erratically. Then, a chime, affirmative. Vector cleared. But the pact evolves. Observers minimal, data reciprocal. Relief washed over Ilara as Jax's muffled curse echoed from the grate. Got it. Followed by the whine of stabilizing systems. The chamber steadied, lights normalizing. But as the hologram solidified, she caught Jax's eye emerging from the panel, smeared with soot. His grin was fierce, but his limp betrayed the burn on his leg, a small cost yet one that lingered. They had passage, but the Zoritha's minimal observers meant eyes on their every move. Diplomacy wasn't dead, it had just grown teeth. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles whitening as the stars blurred into streaks outside the viewport. The Odyssey's engines hummed with a strained rhythm, pushing the colony ship farther from the Orion Arms diplomatic hubs. It had been 3 days since the Council's final betrayal, those sleek Vexery envoys promising aid, only to sabotage the fuel relays in a bid to strand humanity's exodus. Now, with reserves dipping critically low, the crew's early jury-rigged bypass was fraying at the edges. Status, Lena? Ilara called over her shoulder, not turning from the void. Her voice carried the clipped edge of someone who'd bartered her optimism for survival. Lena Core, the wiry engineer with grease-streaked tattoos mapping her arms like circuit diagrams, wiped sweat from her brow. She hunched over a portable console, fingers flying across holographic keys. Holding but barely. The auxiliary pumps are overheating, another hour and we'll lose thrust symmetry. If we don't vent the excess, it'll cascade to the core. Kale, the Thalian diplomat who defected to their side, paced nearby, his iridescent scales flickering with agitation under the deck lights. Unlike the pompous Vexery, Kale's people valued bonds over broadcasts. He'd smuggled the warning that saved them from total blackout. We cannot afford delay, he said, his translated voice a soft rumble. Scanners show pursuit. 2 Vexery interceptors, closing from Vector 7. They mask as traitors, but their signatures scream military. The plan had been simple. Slingshot around a gas giant for gravitational boost, masking their trail in the debris field. But the sabotage had thrown off their mass calibrations, turning what should have been a clean escape into a desperate weave through asteroid clusters. She'd chosen this route for its cover, not realizing how the weakened engines would amplify every gravitational tug. Options? She asked, finally facing them. Lena's eyes met hers, cautious, always calculating risks like a ledger. Kale stopped pacing, his compound eyes reflecting the console's glow, a mix of loyalty and the weight of his forsaken alliance. Lena tapped the screen, pulling up a sim. We could dump non-essentials, cryopods for the outer colonists, maybe the hydroponics bays. Lighten the load by time. But we'd lose 200 souls and our food independence. Or reroute power from life support, but that's playing with fire in these belts. Kale interjected, leaning in. Diplomacy is myth now, as you humans say, but not deception. Feign distress, hail them as allies in need. Draw them close, then ignite the debris field with a plasma burst. Your ingenuity with improvised flares could turn their arrogance against them. Ilera waited, the hum of the ship vibrating through her boots. Dumping cargo felt like surrender, echoing the Council's dismissals of human primitivism. The faint risked exposure, but Kale's insight into Vexery tactics rang true. They thrived on superiority, blind to traps born of grit. Do both, she decided, voice steady. Prep the dump sequence, Lena. Minimal losses, prioritize the bays. Kale composed the hail. Make it desperate, believable. We adapt or we drift. Lena hesitated, her cautious nature flaring. Captain, the sims show a 40% chance the burst backfires on us. We're already limping. Then make it 50, Ilera replied, clapping her shoulder. We've turned worse odds into legend. As Lena dove back into her console, rerouting flows with grim efficiency, Kale began modulating the comms array. The ship shuddered, a distant clang echoing from the engineering decks, another relay straining. Outside, the asteroid field loomed larger, jagged rocks tumbling like forgotten promises. Ilera returned to the viewport, watching the interceptor's faint signatures pulse closer. The cost was mounting, not just fuel but trust, futures. Yet in that tension the crew's resolve sharpened, a human spark refusing to gut her out. Alarms blared suddenly, red lights strobing across the deck. Lena bolted upright. Impact. Debris hit the starboard nacelle, shields down 30%. Ilera's plan teetered, the feint now a gamble amid shattering silence. Hold course, she ordered, heart pounding. We make them believe we're breaking. The Endeavor's engines hummed a low, insistent vibration through the deck plating, a reminder that they were still accelerating away from the diplomatic station. 3 days since the betrayal, and the weight of it pressed on her like the artificial gravity. She glanced at her reflection in the glass, tired eyes, jaw set in that stubborn line her crew knew too well. Brave they called her, but right now it felt more like foolish. Lieutenant Kai Ren, ever the cautious one, hovered nearby, his tablet clutched like a shield. Captain, the scans show the alien fleet holding position. They're not pursuing, but that doesn't mean they're done with us. His voice was steady, but the slight tremor in his hands betrayed the anxiety. Kai had been the diplomat's right hand before everything went to hell. Now he second-guessed every decision, including trusting the humans who'd smuggled them aboard. From the shadows of the corridor, Dr. Mira Thorne emerged, her lab coat rumpled and her witty smirk absent for once. She carried a small vial of shimmering blue liquid, the last sample of the xenobioluminescent compound they'd salvaged from the station. If we're running on fumes, this might buy us time. The compound could supercharge the warp drive, but it's unstable. One wrong mix and we light up like a supernova. Myra's eyes flicked to Ilera, challenging her to decide. The doctor had always been the clever adapter, turning crises into breakthroughs, but this felt like gambling with their lives. Ilera nodded, pushing off the railing. We adapt or we die out here. Kai, plot a course to the nearest neutral relay, evade if they twitch. Mira, get that compound into the engines. No heroics, just make it work. The words came out sharper than intended, the tension coiling in her chest. The challenge wasn't just the fleet, It was the resource shortage biting deeper every hour. Oxygen recyclers at 72%, food rations halved, and now this volatile alien tech is their Hail Mary. As they moved to the engineering bay, alarms blared, a proximity alert. Kai's tablet lit up with red warnings. Incoming drones swarm from the station. They're probing our shields. Small, insect-like craft swarmed the view screen, their hulls glinting like obsidian. Not a full assault, but enough to test their resolve, to remind them that diplomacy was a myth shattered by humanity's desperate departure. Elara slammed her fist on the console. Evasive maneuvers. Mira, hurry. The ship lurched as Kai punched in the commands, the Endeavor twisting through the void. Sparks flew from a panel as a drone grazed the hull, the impact sending a shiver through the frame. In the engine room below, Mira worked frantically, her hands steady despite the chaos. She poured the compound into the injector, watching the blue glow spread like veins through the core. "Come on, you beautiful bastard," she muttered, wiping sweat from her brow. The swarm closed in, their energy beams lancing out, weakening the shields. Kai's voice crackled over the comm. "Shields at 40%. We can't take much more." Elara's mind raced. Human grit meant pushing limits, but camaraderie demanded she protect her team. She activated the auxiliary thrusters, a risky burst that slung them toward a nearby asteroid field. Debris pinged off the hull like hail, but it scattered the drones, buying precious seconds. In engineering, the drive whined to life, the compound igniting with a fierce blue flare visible even from the bridge. Mira hooped, her caution forgotten in the triumph. "It's holding. Warp in 30. But as the ship jumped, a final drone latched onto the exterior, its payload deploying, a tracking beacon that would summon the fleet. Elara exhaled, the stars snapping back into focus post-jump. They were safe for now, but the lingering consequence burned. The aliens knew their vector. Diplomacy's corpse floated behind them, and humanity's ingenuity had only delayed the inevitable hunt. Kai met her gaze, his caution hardening into resolve. "What's our next play, Captain?" She straightened, the weight settling but not breaking her. "We find allies. Or we make them." Captain Elara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the auxiliary engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with static, showing the fractured silhouette of the asteroid belt ahead, where the Crothian blockade loomed. Her crew, Jax, the wiry engineer with a perpetual squint from years in engine bays, and Mira, the sharp-tongued navigator whose optimism had frayed like old rigging, watched her expectantly. They were down to 3 now, after the skirmish that cost them Lena, and the weight of that loss hung heavier than the dwindling oxygen reserves. "Status on the jury-rigged cloaking field?" Elara asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. She wasn't one for dramatics, but the Crothian sensor nets were tightening, and humanity's last diplomatic envoy ship wasn't built for evasion. Jax wiped grease from his brow, tapping his console. "Holding at 60%, Cap. It's a patchwork of hull plating and what scrap we salvage from the debris field, but it'll bend light around us for another hour, maybe 2 if we don't push the thrusters." He glanced at Mira, who was plotting micro-jumps through the belt's gravitational chaos. "Any luck finding a gap?" Myra's fingers danced over her holographic map, her usual wit subdued. "The blockade's adaptive. Every time I spot a weak point, their drones shift. But there's a narrow corridor here, laced with unstable rocks. If we time it right, we could slingshot through using the asteroid's pull. Risky though. One wrong nudge and we're pulverized." Elara nodded, her mind racing through contingencies. The mission had started as a farewell gesture, humanity's great exodus from the galaxy, leaving behind alliances forged in blood and barter. But the Crothians, ever paranoid, saw withdrawal as weakness, a prelude to some hidden human weapon. Diplomacy had crumbled into blockade, turning what should have been a dignified departure into a desperate gauntlet. And now, with the core world signals gone silent, failure meant not just the end of talks, but the mythologizing of humanity as cowards or ghosts. "Set the course," Elara decided. "We'll use the corridor. Jax, divert power from life support to shields, just enough to survive the ride. Mira, sink us with the rock field's tumble." The ship lurched as they engaged, the cloaking field shimmering like heat haze. Alarms blared softly in the background, a reminder of the failing recyclers. Jax muttered under his breath, rerouting energy flows with practiced efficiency, his hands a blur. This old girl was meant for parades, not pirate runs, he said half to himself. Mira shot him a grin that didn't reach her eyes. Then let's give her a story worth telling. Humans don't fade out, we improvise. The asteroid belt swallowed them whole. Jagged boulders tumbled in lazy arcs, their shadows eclipsing the distant stars. Ilara felt the pull, a gravitational tug-of-war that made her stomach lurch. The first rock grazed their hull with a screech of metal, sparks dancing across the viewscreen. Adjust port thrusters, 5 degrees, she barked. Mira complied, the ship banking sharply. But the Crothian drones were closing in, their scans piercing the cloak in fits and starts. A warning ping echoed, enemy lock-on imminent. They're on to us, Jax growled, slamming a fist on his panel. The power diversion hit a snag, overloaded circuits from the earlier hit. Lights dimmed and the air grew thicker, stale. Ilara unstrapped, moving to Jax's station. Talk to me. Can we bypass? He traced a fault line on the schematic, sweat beading on his forehead. Main conduit's fried, but if I shunt through the secondary coolant lines, it'll work, but we'll vent heat like a supernova. Engines overheat in minutes. Do it. She placed a hand on his shoulder, a rare gesture. We've come too far to let a spark end us. The bypass engaged with a whine, and the ship surged forward, weaving through the narrowing gap. A massive asteroid loomed, its pitted surface filling the screen like a judgmental eye. Myra's voice cut through the tension. Hold on, evasive pattern delta. They dodged, the rock's gravity whipping them sideways. But the maneuver exposed them fully. Crothian fire lanced out, a plasma bolt clipping their aft stabilizers. The deck shuddered, klaxons wailing. Shields at 20%. Jax yelled. Ilara's mind flashed to the archives they'd carried, humanity's legacy of grit, from ancient explorers to the voidwalkers who built this fleet. No speeches now, just action. Mira, full burn toward that cluster, used their debris as cover. The navigator punched the commands, and they plunged into a swarm of fragments from a recent collision. Shrapnel pinged off the hull like hail, but it masked their signature. The drones faltered, sensors overwhelmed. Breathing ragged, Ilara watched the blockade recede on the rear sensors. They'd broken through, but the cost was etched in the flickering readouts. Engines critical, air for days at best. The diplomatic corps waited beyond, a faint beacon amid the stars. One step closer to proving departure wasn't defeat, but a new beginning. Yet as the ship stabilized, Mira turned, her face pale. Cap, incoming transmission, from the Crothian flagship. They're hailing us. Ilara straightened, the weight of potential alliance, or final confrontation, settling like dust after a storm. Open the channel. Let's see if myths can still be rewritten. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the console edge, her knuckles whitening as the shuttle shuddered through the nebulous fringes. The violet haze outside clawed at the viewport, tendrils of ionized gas sparking against the hull like distant fireworks. Beside her, Jax leaned forward, his wiry frame tense, eyes scanning the sensor readouts with that unyielding focus that had kept them alive through a dozen botched negotiations. We've got incoming, Jax muttered, his voice a low rumble over the hum of straining engines. 3 signatures closing fast. Not ours. Ilara nodded, not trusting words yet. The diplomatic envoy from the Krell Collective had promised safe passage back to the neutral relay, but the nebula was their territory, uncharted, unforgiving, a graveyard for overconfident ships. Humanity's abrupt withdrawal from the Galactic Accord had left voids like this, alliances fraying into suspicion. What was once a web of treaties now whispered of myths, stories of humans brokering peace with bare hands and stubborn will. Evade pattern delta, she ordered, her tone steady despite the knot in her gut. The shuttle banked hard, inertial dampeners whining as they skimmed a plasma bloom. Jax's fingers danced across the controls, plotting a course through the denser clouds where sensors would falter. From the rear compartment, Dr. Lena's voice cut in, sharp with urgency. They're hailing us. Audio only, insistent. Lena, the xenolinguist, had been their bridge to the stars, her cautious optimism a counterweight to Ilara's grit. But now even she sounded frayed. Patch it through, Ilara said. Static crackled, then a guttural voice filtered through Lena's translation matrix. Human vessel. You trespass in sacred veils. State purpose or be claimed by the drift. Elara exchanged a glance with Jax. The Krell's sacred veils were nebula currents that could shred a ship, but this felt like a test, or a trap. Diplomacy's ghost lingered. Humans had once navigated these tensions with clever words, turning rivals into allies. Now, with the Exodus, those skills were relics. We're en route to the relay under Accord Remnant protocols, Elara replied, keeping her voice even. No intent to trespass. Request clearance. Silence stretched, broken only by the shuttle's groans. Then, protocols are dust. Prove worth or join the myths. The sensors lit up, the pursuers accelerating, weaving through gas pockets with eerie precision. Jax cursed under his breath. They're herding us toward the core. Bad currents there, one wrong move and we're ionized scrap. Elara's mind raced. The early plan had been simple. Slip through the nebula's edge, avoid contact. But the Krell ships had anticipated them, forcing this confrontation. She thought of the data core in the hold, humanity's parting gift, archives of shared histories meant to remind the galaxy of what was lost. If it fell into the wrong hands? Lena, any read on their intent? Elara asked, not taking her eyes off the viewport where the nebula swirled like a living storm. Ambiguous, Lena replied from the comms. Their language layers ritual with threat. Could be a guardianship right or they're scavenging for tech. We backfire if we run, they'll see it as guilt. Jax snorted, a wry edge to it. Great. So we play their game or get mythologized as cautionary tales. The shuttle lurched as a proximity alert blared. One Krell craft skimmed too close, its energy wake buffeting them. Elara's hand hovered over the evasion thrusters. No, running would confirm their suspicions. Humans didn't flee, they adapted. Open a visual channel, she decided. Show them we're not hiding. Lena hesitated. That exposes us, do it. Elara straightened, facing the pickup. The screen flickered to life, revealing a Krell commander. Elongated limbs, bioluminescent markings pulsing in warning blues. Its ship loomed in the background, a sleek predator amid the haze. We carry no weapons, Elara said directly, her words translated in real time. Only records of the old ways. Let us pass and share in the knowledge. The Krell's eyes narrowed, facets glinting. Knowledge? Or the blade that cut ties? Tension coiled in the cabin. Jax adjusted course subtly, buying seconds. Outside, a gas tendril lashed out, scoring the shields with a flash of light. The cost was already mounting, power reserves dipping, air recyclers straining from the heat. Then, the Krell tilted its head, markings shifting to cautious greens. Transmit sample. If truth, passage granted. If lie, your departure becomes our legend. Elara nodded to Lena, who cued a fragment of the archives. A hollow of the first human Krell summit, hands clasped in unlikely trust. As it beamed across the void, the pursuing ships held formation, no longer closing. Minutes stretched like hours. The nebula pressed in, a single vivid arc of plasma illuminating the Krell's hull like veins of fire. Finally, the response, truth echoes. Proceed, remnant bearers. But no, the myth's hunger for more. The channel cut. The Krell vessels peeled away, vanishing into the clouds. Jax exhaled, easing the throttle. Clever play, Cap. But that data sample, they could twist it. Elara watched the nebula recede, the shuttle steadying toward clearer space. The relay beacon winked in the distance, a fragile light. They'd passed the test, but the archives were lighter now, a piece given to ghosts of diplomacy. Humanity's grit had bought them through, yet the galaxy's suspicions lingered, a consequence etched in every shadowed drift. Captain Elara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the Odysseus engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with the debris field ahead, a graveyard of shattered alien hulls, remnants of the last skirmish with the Vorath swarm. Her crew, down to 3 after the boarding raid 2 jumps back, moved with the quiet efficiency of survivors. Reyes, the wiry engineer with a perpetual squint, patched the auxiliary systems from his console. Lila, the navigator whose optimism had frayed into grim determination, plotted their evasion course. And Jax, the security chief, broad-shouldered and silent, checked his rifle for the third time. "They're closing, Cap," Lila said, her voice steady but etched. The Vorath signatures blinked red on the tactical overlay, a pack of biomechanical hunters zeroing in on the Odyssey's weakening shields. Humanity's departure from the Galactic Concord had turned old alliances to dust. No more diplomatic channels, no myths of unity left to invoke. Just the cold math of survival. Ilara nodded, her fingers dancing over the controls. "Reyes, divert power to the forward arrays. We need that gravitic pulse ready." The plan was simple. Lure the lead Vorath into the debris, trigger a pulse to destabilize their adaptive hulls, then slip through the gap. But nothing about the Vorath was simple. Their ships morphed mid-battle, tendrils lashing out like living weapons. Reyes grunted, sweat beading on his forehead. "On it. But if this backfires, we're scrap." His hands flew across the board, rerouting energy from life support. The air grew stuffier, recyclers whining in protest. Jax shifted, his eyes on the secondary feed. 2 minutes to intercept. They're deploying drones. The Vorath fighters detached, insectal forms swarming toward the field. Ilara's mind raced. The Concord's diplomats had called the Vorath a misunderstanding, but out here it was kill or be absorbed. Humanity's grit had gotten them this far, cobbled repairs, jury-rigged weapons, but the cost mounted. Lila's brother lost in the raid. Rhea's limp from a hull breach. Her own scars hidden under the uniform. "Adjust course, Lila. Bring us in tight." The Odyssey banked sharply, thrusters flaring against the void. Debris loomed, jagged spires of twisted metal glinting in the starlight. One piece, a Concorde frigate's prow, caught Ilara's eye, its faded emblem a cruel reminder of what they'd left behind. The first Vorath ship breached the field, its hull rippling like oil on water. Drones buzzed closer, scanning for weaknesses. "Pulse now." Ilara barked. Reyes slammed the activator. A low thrum built, then erupted in a shimmering wave. The lead Vorath shuddered, tendrils flailing as its structure warped. It collided with a debris chunk, erupting in a silent bloom of plasma. But the swarm adapted. The remaining ships shed their outer layers, streamlining into spear-like forms that darted through the chaos unscathed. Alarms blared, drones latching onto the Odyssey's hull. "They're on us." Jax yelled, bolting for the access hatch. He sealed his helmet, rifle ready. "I'll clear them." Ilara hesitated, then nodded. "Go. Lila, keep us moving." Jax vanished into the corridors, the ship rocking as the drones burrowed. Lila's hands trembled on the yoke. "Shields at 20%. We can't take another hit." Ilara leaned forward, scanning the field. There, a narrow channel, lined with volatile ion remnants from the old battle. Risky, but the Voratha's new forms might not flex enough to follow. "Take us through the ion lane." Full burn. The Odyssey surged, engines screaming. Debris whipped past, a metallic storm. One drone's claw scraped the viewport, leaving a gouge like a fresh wound. Jax's voice crackled over comms. "Got two off, but they're adapting faster. Hull integrity dropping." "Hold on," Ilara replied, her voice a anchor. The ion lane glowed ahead, charged particles crackling. As they plunged in, the ship bucked, systems flickering. The pursuing Vorath hesitated, their forms straining against the electromagnetic fury. One broke through, firing a tendril that grazed the aft section. Alarms wailed, engineering breach. "Reyes!" Ilara shouted. "I'm on it." He abandoned his station, grabbing a toolkit. The ship listed, but Lila corrected, weaving through the lane's heart. Jax reported in breathless. "Last drone down. But we've got venting." The Odyssey emerged from the lane, the remaining Vorath ships faltering in the aftermath, their hulls sparking. Ilara exhaled, plotting the next jump. They'd bought time, but the swarm would regroup. The departure's myth lingered in the stars, humanity's ingenuity a fragile light against the encroaching dark. And the cost? Another scar on the ship, another weight on their shoulders. Elena gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles whitening as the stars blurred past the viewport. The Odyssey's engines hummed with a strained rhythm, like a heartbeat skipping beats. Below them, the debris field of the shattered Krell outpost loomed, a graveyard of twisted metal and flickering emergency beacons, remnants of the ambush that had claimed half their supplies. Marcus was already at work in the adjacent engineering bay, his voice crackling over the comms. This jury-rigged filter's holding, but not for long. One more surge from that nebula, and we'll be breathing vacuum. She nodded to herself, though he couldn't see it. Lila hovered nearby, her fingers dancing over the navigation console, eyes narrowed in concentration. The cautious one, always plotting 3 escapes ahead, but even she had pushed them into this mess, diving into the field to salvage what they could from the Krell wreckage. "I've got a path," Lila said, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her forehead. "Tight, but it'll skirt the worst of the ion storms. We grab the power cells from that forward derelict and we're out." The plan had seemed solid back in the planning huddle. Slip in quiet, extract the cells to recharge their failing core, evade the patrolling Vexery scouts who'd turned the sector into a no-man's land. Humans had brokered peace here once, back when Earth's envoys walked the galactic halls, turning rivalries into alliances with sheer stubborn negotiation. But that was before the departure, when humanity pulled back, leaving myths of their diplomacy in the archives. Now it was just them, 3 survivors of a forgotten outpost, scavenging to get home. Elena activated her suit's thrusters, the soft hiss propelling her toward the airlock. "Marcus, you're with me on the EVA. Lila, keep her steady." The hatch cycled open to the void, and they tumbled out, tethered lines snaking behind. The derelict loomed ahead, its hull scarred by plasma burns, a silent testament to the Vexery's efficiency. Marcus's voice buzzed in her helmet. "You know, if we'd stuck to protocol, we'd be sipping synth coffee on a neutral station right now. But no, Captain Braveheart here wants to play hero." "Save the wit for after we don't die," Elena shot back, but a grin tugged at her lips under the visor. He was the glue, cracking wise to keep the panic at bay. They maneuvered through the debris, dodging jagged shards that spun lazily in the zero-G. The derelict's airlock was intact, but prying it open took precious minutes, Marcus wedging his multi-tool into the seals while Elena scanned for traps. Inside, the corridors were a maze of dim red lighting and floating debris. Their boots magnetized to the floor with dull thuds. "Cells should be in the core room 2 decks down," Marcus muttered, consulting his wrist pad. But as they descended, a low groan echoed through the ship, not structural but mechanical. Alarms blared suddenly, holographic warnings flickering to life in an alien script Elena's translator struggled to parse. "Vexery proximity alert," Lila's voice cut in urgently. "They're closing fast, must have picked up our signature. Get out now." Elena cursed under her breath. The plan was backfiring spectacularly. The derelict systems were still live, broadcasting their position like a flare. They sprinted, awkward in the suits, toward the core plasma cutters blazing to slice through a jammed door. There, amid sparking consoles, the power cells glowed faintly, 3 pristine orbs humming with untapped energy. Marcus yanked one free, slinging it onto his back. One down, a shudder rocked the ship. Vexery boarding pods, sleek and predatory, latched onto the hull with metallic shrieks. Elena grabbed the second cell, her heart pounding. "Lila, evasive maneuvers. Buy us time." From the bridge, Lila wrestled the controls, the Odyssey weaving through the field like a dancer in a storm. Ion bursts lit the void outside, Vexery fighters swarming like angry wasps. She fired the auxiliary thrusters, a burst of ingenuity from Marcus's earlier mods, slinging them behind a massive chunk of wreckage. But the strain showed, the console sparked, and a warning light flared for hull integrity. Back on the derelict, Elena and Marcus hauled the third cell, racing for the airlock. Vexery drones whirred to life in the corridors, red sensors sweeping. One zipped toward them, energy lance charging. Elena dove, firing her sidearm, a human-issue pulse rifle that punched through its chassis with a satisfying crackle. "Not today," she growled, the grit of her ancestors fueling the shot. They burst into the void just as the Odyssey swung back, airlock yawning open. Tethers pulled taut, reeling them in amid the chaos. Vexery fire grazed Elena's suit, scorching the fabric but not breaching. Inside they slammed the hatch, cells clattering to the deck. Marcus patched them into the core with frantic efficiency, his hands steady despite the ship bucking under impacts. "Core at 60%, he announced, wiping sweat from his brow. But the cost was clear, Lila's console smoked, navigation half-blind, and a hull breach in the lower decks hissed air into space. The Vexri weren't done. Their lead ship loomed on sensors, locking weapons. Elena took the helm, her resolve hardening. We've got enough juice to jump. Lila, plot the vector. Anything that gets us clear. As the engine surged back to life, the human spark ignited, not myth, but muscle and mind, turning the tide. One desperate adaptation out of the dim glow of the auxiliary console flickered across Lena's face as she hunched over the controls, her fingers dancing across the patched-together interface. Sweat beaded on her forehead, not from the failing life support, though that hummed too faintly now, but from the weight of what she'd uncovered in the archives. The Krell ship's logs, half-corrupted from the ion storm, painted a picture no one had dared believe. Humanity's exodus wasn't abandonment. It was a feint, a deliberate withdrawal to lure the Vorath armada into overextension. And now, with the fleet's remnants scattered, the truth stared back at her like a ghost in the machine. Captain, Jorik rumbled from the navigation station, his scaled brow furrowed. The Thraxian engineer wiped grease from his claws, his usual gruff optimism cracking under the strain. The drive's holding, but if we push her any harder we'll vent plasma into the void. Those Vorath scouts are closing, 2 light minutes and gaining. Lena didn't look up. Her mind raced through the fragments. Diplomatic envoys vanishing into the black, treaties dissolved overnight, all to mask the real plan. Humanity's grit had always been in the long game, turning retreat into a weapon sharper than any laser. But here, adrift on this salvaged hulk with Jorik and the silent AI core they jury-rigged from the debris, the stakes felt personal. One wrong jump, and the myth of human cunning died with them. Divert power from shields, she said, voice steady despite the knot in her gut. We need every joule for the comms burst. If the logs are right, there's a relay beacon in the nebula, old human design. It'll amplify the signal galaxy-wide. Jorik's tail lashed against the deck plating. And if the Vorath intercept? They'll glass us before we blink. Then we make them chase ghosts. Lena keyed in the sequence, pulling from memories of her grandfather's stories, tales of diplomats who talked empires into knots, only to slip the noose when it tightened. The console beeped affirmation, and she patched the archive feed directly into the transmitter. No speeches, no grand declarations, just raw data, unfiltered proof that humanity's departure had been the ultimate negotiation, buying time for allies to regroup. Alarms wailed as the first Vorath probe locked on, its shadow eclipsing the stars on the view screen. Jorik braced, muttering a Thraxian curse that echoed like grinding stones. Lena hit transmit. The ship lurched forward, engines screaming as they dove toward the nebula's swirling heart. Purple tendrils of gas whipped past, distorting sensors, but the beacon's signature pulsed ahead, a faint, defiant heartbeat. In the chaos, a new ping cut through the noise. Not Vorath. Human. A squadron, emerging from the gas clouds like specters, their hulls scarred but intact. Lena's breath caught. The myth wasn't dead, it was waking up. But the Vorath vanguard broke through the interference, weapons hot. Jorik roared, slamming auxiliary thrusters to evade. Lena gripped the armrest, the archive's final log entry burning in her mind. Asterisk diplomacy is the art of the possible. Departure makes it eternal. Asterisk the battle ignited in the nebula's embrace, lasers carving fiery paths through the haze. Lena's hands flew to weapons sync, her caution yielding to the fire her ancestors had forged. Jorik laughed, a deep, rumbling sound, as he coaxed the ship into a barrel roll that shaved Sikans off their doom. Allies swarmed the comms, voices overlapping in a chorus of grit and relief. One Vorath cruiser buckled under combined fire, its debris blooming like a dying star. But another pressed close, boarding pods launching. Lena's squadron mates closed ranks, their ingenuity mirroring hers. Drones deploying in patterns no alien tactician could predict, turning the nebula into a labyrinth of traps. As the skirmish peaked, Lena glimpsed the cost. A human frigate venting atmosphere, its cruise signals cutting short. No melodrama, just the sharp ache of lives bartered for the greater feint. The Vorath faltered, their formation cracking under the unexpected resurgence. Jorik clapped her shoulder, scales warm against her uniform. Your people, they don't break. They bend the stars instead. Lena nodded, eyes on the fading enemy signatures. The signal had gone out, rippling across the relays. Diplomacy reborn, not in words but in the thunder of return. Yet as the nebula cleared, revealing the Armada's distant glow, she knew the myth's weight. Triumph earned, but the war far from won. One more push, and the galaxy would remember why humans never truly left. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the helm of the Aurora's Dawn, her knuckles white against the worn alloy. The ship's engines hummed a low, defiant rhythm, pushing through the debris field that had once been the heart of the Coalition's fleet. Alarms blared intermittently, silenced by her swift taps on the console, reminders of the hull breaches they'd patched with scavenged plating and sheer will. Beside her, Jax leaned forward, his eyes scanning the tactical display, fingers dancing over auxiliary controls. They're regrouping, Cap. That Krell dreadnought's turning broadside. Looks like they're prepping a full salvo. She nodded, jaw set. The plan had been simple at the start. Extract the human delegation from the fractured summit on Epsilon Prime, slip through the blockade and punch a hole to open space. But nothing stayed simple with the Coalition. The insectoid Krell, ever the enforcers of their crumbling alliance, had turned the evacuation into a siege. Diplomacy? That word felt like a relic now, a myth spun from humanity's long patience with species who saw negotiation as weakness. The humans had come offering tech shares, cultural bridges, only to watch it all shatter when the Vorath rebels struck first, igniting a war that made alliances evaporate like mist. Status on the core? Ilara asked, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her brow. The Aurora wasn't built for this. She was a diplomatic courier, sleek and fast, not some armored behemoth. But Jax, wiry, quick-witted Jax with his endless jury rigs, had turned her into something more. Containment holding at 87%, he replied, not looking up. That last hit from their plasma lances fried half the stabilizers. One more and we're venting atmosphere. He paused, then added with a grim smile, but I've got the inertial dampeners rerouted through the auxiliary power grid. We can dodge like a flea on a hexapede. Behind them, in the cramped crew bay, Dr. Lena Hart monitored the vitals of the delegates. Her hands moved with the precision of someone who'd spent years mending diplomatic wounds rather than physical ones, but today she wielded a med scanner like a weapon. Ambassador Hale's stable, she called out. The others are shaken but intact. We can't take another boarding attempt. Those Vorath claws shredded the outer locks. Ilara's mind flashed to the chaos on Epsilon Prime. The summit hall erupting in plasma fire, humans shielding alien envoys as the Coalition fractured. Humanity's departure wasn't abandonment, it was survival. The galaxy had mythologized their endless talks, their grit in bridging chasms, but myths didn't win battles. Helm to engineering, Mira, give me everything you've got. We're not dying in this scrapyard. From the comms, Myra's voice crackled, laced with her usual cautious edge. The youngest of them, Mira, preferred schematics to speeches, but her steady hands had kept the Aurora flying through 3 system jumps already. Everything's a relative term, Cap fusion coils are redlining. I can surge for 30 seconds, maybe enough to slingshot us past their formation. But it'll cook the relays. We limp home after that. Do it. Ilara's order hung in the air, heavy with the weight of choices made. The view screen showed the Krell dreadnought looming, its carapace-like hull bristling with turrets. Smaller Vorath raiders swarmed like angry hornets, their boarding pods glinting in the starlight. The debris, twisted hulks of ships that had once symbolized unity, clogged their escape vector, a graveyard of failed talks. Jax hooped as the ship lurched. Dampeners online. Punch it. Ilara yanked the controls, the Aurora twisting through a narrow gap between tumbling wreckage. A plasma bolt grazed their shields, sparking across the viewport like lethal fireworks. The delegates in the bay strapped down tighter, their faces pale masks of resolve. Hale, the ambassador with his salt and pepper beard and unyielding calm, met Ilara's glance through the feed. No words, just a nod. They'd all seen enough to know this was the cost of walking away. Myra's surge hit like a thunderclap. The engines roared, propelling them into a corkscrew evasion that left 2 Vorath pods colliding in their wake. The Krell dreadnought fired, a barrage that lit the void, but the Aurora was already accelerating, slipping through a fleeting corridor in the debris. Alarms wailed as the hull groaned under the strain, but they held. Clearing the field, Jax announced, his voice rising. Jump point in range. Elara initiated the fold, space warping around them in a blur of hyperspace ribbons. The ship shuddered once, twice, then settled into the smooth hum of transit. Silence fell, broken only by the settling creaks of stressed metal. In the aftermath, Elara unstrapped, her legs unsteady. The crew gathered in the bay, faces etched with exhaustion. Lena passed out ration packs, her cautious optimism shining through. We made it. Humanity's out, but the galaxy just lost its biggest talker. Hale stood, leaning on a bulkhead. Diplomacy isn't dead. It's evolving. We take our ingenuity elsewhere, build from the grit we showed today. He glanced at the stars streaking past. They'll remember us not as the ones who left, but as the spark that reignited their own. Jax clapped Mira on the back. Relays are toast, but we fly. What's next, Cap? Elara looked out at the endless black, the weight of their narrow escape a scar on the ship, and,